Well, I love learning foreign languages, but what I love even more is teaching foreign languages. So this is how I got to know this method. And well, for me, I deeply enjoy when my students, especially the ones beginning from scratch, tell me about their first conversations in Spanish after a trip or after a work meeting. And they look at me with these eyes, just like if they were children opening their presents. So I really enjoy this feeling. This is why I teach, and I love teaching. So the language learning method I will present today is not quite new, but I think it's a very creative method and very up to date. People work with this method a lot. And well, there's not much left to say about myself, but what is special about Vera Birkenbihls method is Vera Birkenbihl. Vera Birkenbihl is, I would say, one of my favorite persons ever. And not only because of her work in the language learning field, but also because of the way she saw life. She was a person that was very, very logical, very eloquent, very intuitive. And every time I attended one of her talks, one of her seminars, I always had a feeling that everything she was presented just sounded natural and very, very logical. And at the end, I always thought, like, why do we make our life so hard? This is so simple. Why didn't I thought about this before? So this is why I started learning more about her work. And I am very honored that I had the opportunity to learn this language method directly from her. Well, as I already said, Vera Birkenbihl was an extraordinary woman. She was ahead of her time, very creative, and she usually said her unique selling proposition was brain-friendly learning and teaching. So brain-friendly is a word we will find a lot in her method, and I will say why later on. So she also said that it was very important to turn the learning process into something fun, because if you are having fun, you are highly motivated. So this was very important for her, that you always have this feeling of success so that you want to continue learning a language. And she also spoke a lot about non-learning learning strategies. And what she actually meant is that there are many children at school learning languages for 10 years, and at the end, they aren't able to speak the language at all. So she was quite critical about the educational system. So for her, she realized that it was very, very important to have fun. And that was one of her premises. And you should learn because you want to, not because you have to, not for your teacher, not for your boss, not for nobody else, just for yourself. And she said the way to get there is doing this in a brain-friendly way. And well, I'll try to explain what this actually means. In her book, I don't know if you have ever heard about this book. It's called Sprachenlernen leicht gemacht, or Learning Languages Made Easy. The thought she follows is, if every child is able to learn his first language at a young age without drilling in vocabulary, there must be a way to imitate this process. And with process, she actually meant a method, of course. And for her, the ideal method shouldn't stick rigorously to the way we learned our mother tongue in early childhood. She said we should take advantage that we already speak our mother tongue and use it as sort of a springboard or fundament so that we can learn a new language. And she even thought that our mother tongue was the hardest language to learn, because we begin from scratch. And she said when we learn the second language, it might represent a challenge, but when we are learning the third or the fourth or the fifth language, it gets easier, because by then we are experts and learning languages. So, well, this is mainly what is behind her approach. And well, she also said that there are different learners and there are different goals. So it's like some people learn a language because they want to make a trip to a specific country, or they are interested in a specific country, the culture, the food, the people. So they are self-motivated. Others have to learn the language because of work. So they have a different motivation. And but still, everybody can learn a language in a fun way, even if it's a must. So she also said that everybody can learn the rules of the game. And she always tried to avoid a little bit saying the rules of the grammar rules, because it's not that she was against grammar. She said, if you want to learn grammar, do it, go ahead. But she liked to consider this part as an option and not a must. And by learning the rules of the game, what she actually meant was that we can learn how a language works without having to put names on the parts of speech to say so. And this is something that is hard to understand for us linguists. Also for me, it was not that easy to understand that, because when we teach, we are used that we say, okay, this is the passive voice, this is an infinitive, but sometimes you might have the experience that you are teaching and you tell your students, today we're going to learn how to use the infinitive form to express opinions. And then your students stare at you if they are not studying linguistics or a language, let's say at university. I'm speaking, of course, about a non-academic setting. And they stare at you and they ask you, what is infinitive? And then you tell them, well, this is when you say to work or to sing or to dance. So she said it's not necessary to know the grammar rules to learn a language. And well, based on that, she developed her method. And her method consists of 4 basic skills, which are speaking, writing, listening, and reading. So for these, you have vocabulary. You need vocabulary. You need active vocabulary to speak and to write. And you also need passive vocabulary to listen and to read. So this will be the 4 basic skills in her approach. Brain friendly. So why brain friendly? Well, first of all, she said that our brain is, of course, a learning organ. And when we learn in a brain friendly way, it's fun, because we are not learning against our brain, but with it. And as soon as we perceive learning as a burden, we don't want to learn anymore. We lose motivation. And of course, also this feeling of success was important to her. And well, in her book, Sprachen lernen leicht gemacht, she spoke about the brain and how it works, but in a very simple way. Of course, this is a very complex topic, and I'm not going to speak about neurolinguistics today, but she mainly speaks about the Wernicke's area down here, which is the area we need to understand speech, and the Broca area up here, which is the area of the brain we need to produce speech. So it was not really about dividing our brain activities in the right side, the left side, but furthermore that there is a teamwork going on, and that we should consider this in the steps we choose to learn a language. So first you need to understand, and she spoke about begreifen, because you really need to understand something because before you can learn what it is. So it's always about an interaction about these parts of our brain and teamwork. Then she also said it is important to build information clusters. And I just realized that my drawing looks a little bit like spiders on a rack. But well, these are not supposed to be spiders. These are concepts. But let's say I'll try to explain this with an example. I wrote the word steering wheel. So let's say if you are learning how to drive, you're sitting in the car and you move the steering wheel, the car moves in a certain direction. So you learn, when I move the steering wheel, the car moves. So this would be the first word you would be learning in this context. And this would be, let's say, one of the, let's call it spiders, one of the bodies of the spiders right here, this knot. And from there, you might derive and learn a new word, like, let's say, to guide. So the legs of the spiders are, so to say, the different like branches of concepts we are learning while learning a main concept. So we have this sort of information clusters in our brain, and this is how we learn. She also said that using our senses is very important for the learning process of a foreign language. And she said the site, in her method, the site, it's more about visualizing the words and reading. But she also speaks in her book that we can also complete her method with images if we think it's easier for us to understand. So she also says that in German, for instance, you say sich ein Bild machen, which means like you have an image in your mind when you hear a word. So I thought about, for instance, the word bread, pan. If you are from Spain, you might imagine barra de pan. But maybe if you are in the UK, you will have a different image. And if you say, for instance, Brot, in Graz, where I live, I would think about Schwarzbrot, because this is what I really think when I hear the word Brot. This is what I associate with this word. And another sense that was very important in her, that is very important in her method, is hearing, which is not actually hearing, it's more listening. But the second and the third steps of her method consist in listening actively and passively. So I'll get to there later. And well, she was very, very critical about drilling in vocabulary, let's say just like learning words by heart. Of course, back then when she developed her method, the educational system at school was different to what it is today. I do not know the system in the UK, but let's say years ago at school, children used to learn like a list of words, vocabulary, and just repeat them over and over and over again. And many times they had just like isolated words, and at the end they didn't really know what they meant. So she said, for instance, if you learn the word Anzug and you repeat it over and over again, and from time to time, okay, this is a suit. And maybe when you actually go shopping and you want to say Anzug, you just forgotten the word, and you will just go like, what was the word? What was the word? And it takes time until you find it somewhere. So she said another problem by learning vocabulary this way is that we are constantly trying to translate the phrases, and very often we have a wrong translation. And she quotes in her book this example. Well, I just translated it a little bit. She says like, where can I become a ticket? When you actually mean like, where can I get, or where can I buy a ticket? So she says when we are trying to translate sentences, sometimes we make these mistakes. And we also try to transfer the structure of our mother tongue to the target language. And I don't know, but at least this is what happens to me. When I speak a foreign language I learned as a child, like English, for instance. I learned it at school. So this is something we tend to do. And at the end, we end up speaking like Yoda from Star Wars or something like that. And we even transfer the melody of our mother tongue to the target language. So this is also one of the main mistakes we tend to do. Okay, so now we're going to start speaking about her method. And I thought it would be fun if after my presentation, we would actually try to decode, to to carry out the first step of the method together, because this is the best way to see how she actually did it. So the first step consists in decoding. This is how she calls it, or decodieren. And she always said, not because you are a beginner, it means that you have to learn simple things. As long as you can understand the text in your mother language, you will be able to understand the same content in a foreign language after learning the phrases, the words. So this is why she didn't really care about the level of the text, let's say the register. She said you can choose any text you want to. So she even made a little bit of fun that at the beginning, all beginners know how to order, I don't know, a glass of wine in a restaurant. And she said, this is not necessary. You can pick the text you want. And once you have chosen a text you're interested in, you sort of translate the text word by word. So at the end, you will have sort of a literal or wrong translation, which is actually the decodification of this phrase. And this appears directly beneath the source text. So I have two examples here. Well, I have some examples to show. So if you would say, for instance, in Spanish, acabo de despertarme, and you would decode it, it would mean finish, and then I, because acabo is the verb used for the first person. De, which would be decoded as of or to, and despertarme, like wake or wake up myself. This is a reflexive verb. And if you have in German auf der Straße, you would have on the street. Here, there will also be the possibility to indicate that this is not there. It's actually in this case, would be the declination of the. So you could also make sort of a note. And this is the flexible part of her method. I will show some of the tricks I use when learning languages. Because decoding, I mean, she sort of provided us with a frame on how to decode, but you can also adjust the method to your needs. You would have, here are other examples, for instance, die Sonne, the sun. In Spanish, the decodification would be la, sol, which of course is wrong in Spanish. In Spanish, the sun, die Sonne, is el sol. So this would be this wrong translation. But by having this decodification, you learn that in German, the sun is not masculine, it's feminine. So this is how you learn in an intuitive way how the other language works, how the foreign language works. Or if you have, for instance, te amont, el luna in Spanish, this is also wrong. In Spanish, it would be la luna, the correct translation. But again, we are using the article in the masculine form, just as it is in German. If you have like parla italiano, you would have something like speak you Italian. Again, it's a wrong translation. Now I have a little bit, I have a longer text here, and I will show you some of the tricks I use when I do the decoding. Usually, proper names such as Rapa Nui, usually I draw a circle around them because you do not really decode them. They remain the same. And well, in this case, I didn't draw the circle, but this is something I would probably do. And Isla de Pascua is a proper name, but there is a translation in English, so I would decode it or translate it in this case. And then when I get to words like, for instance, here, el ombligo, which would be like the and navel del mundo, these articles el and de el, preposition plus article, are masculine. So what I do personally is to use this symbol, the gender symbol, to indicate, oh, this is a masculine article in Spanish. And if you have, for instance, we have it here, a plural form like los monolitos, and then you say the plural, the masculine symbol, and PL for plural, and monoliths. So, I mean, this is something with this with the symbols, this is something I do. This is not something she did. Usually she wrote in brackets that plural plus masculine or feminine and so on. But this is something I like to do because for me, it is easier, at least. When I see it, I associate this immediately to the correct gender. There are, however, some cases where it is impossible to decode, or so you need a translation. This would be the case, for instance, of por ende in Spanish, which I highlighted because this is an expression, a collocation that I cannot really translate, decode, so I translate it. But then I highlight it as such. So I know, okay, this is a translation. I am not decoding here. And again, to have the la Polynesia, la feminine, so I use the feminine gender symbol. This step, decoding, is a step, she said, you do not really have to do it on your own, because we all know let's say the day only has 24 hours, so you do not have the time to be decoding every day text. So you can also work maybe with a teacher that can decode the text for you. This is what I do, for instance, with some of my students. They tell me which text they want to use, and then I do the decodification, and then we work together. Or you can even buy like a book or a course where you can already find the decodification. So this is also a possibility. And well, I would say nowadays this step became easier, since we have TED Talks and you have transcripts on YouTube. And of course, you are not supposed to use the translation, but it helps a lot to decode the text. It makes it more simple. In my opinion, in my experience, Vera's Birkenbihl method is a method many polyglots used. First of all, because well, polyglots follow her idea. Learning a language is fun, so they do it for fun. Just for the joy of learning, and many of them really like to take the time and do this decoding as part of the learning process. But as I said, you can choose to skip this first step and just let someone else do the decoding, and or you can buy a book where you already find this decodifications of the text. Okay. So the second step of the method consists in, well, the sense would be hearing, but of course we speak about listening. So she divided it into active and passive listening. So step 2 would be the active listening. In this part, in this step, what you do is you listen to a recording of the text in the foreign language while reading only the decodification. So you only read the decodification of the text. You're listening the foreign language, but you're reading in your own language, the wrong translation. And this is something you repeat a couple of times while visualizing the words of the wrong translation. And you can repeat it phrase by phrase and repeat it over and over again a couple of times until you start feeling familiar with this, with the words, with the phrases in the foreign languages. So once you have the feeling that the phrases sound familiar, you can now start reading the text in the foreign language too. So now you listen the text in the foreign language, and you also read the text in the foreign language. And at the same time, you might want to visualize at the same time also the wrong translation. So this is something you would do a couple of times until you feel familiar with the vocabulary and you understand the meaning of the sentences and of the phrases. There is not such thing as a time frame. This depends, of course, on your learning skills, on how often you do it. But she always said, if you take like 15 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day, this works. At least for me, I think it works quite well. I like her method. I am currently trying to learn Turkish, which turns out to be quite challenging because of the pronunciation, and it is a very, very different languages to the languages I speak. Okay, so we continue with step number 3, which would be passive listening. So once you have been reading the phrases in the original language, in the foreign language, and you have been visualizing the wrong translation, and you feel familiar with these phrases and understand their meaning, now you can go a step further and start listening to these recordings while doing something else. This is something nowadays we are very familiar with. We are cooking and we're listening to a podcast, or we are cleaning and we're listening to, I don't know, a presentation in YouTube. So I would say this is something we now do a lot. So this is not really different from that. We are just listening to the text we already know, we already understand. And this way we reinforce our knowledge, and we also learn the melody of the language. And this is why she says, if we learn a language from scratch this way, we will be able to lose our accent. Most of us, I don't know you, but I learned English at school, so it's a different process I had. And I do think after so many years, English is a language where I say, oh my God, I'm never going to get rid of my accent. So I think her method helps a lot, because from the very beginning, you are listening to this, to the language melody, to the melody of the language, and you are really getting used to it. And she says, don't continue with the next step, with the last step before you do not, you are not sure that you really recognize the words and the word melody. It makes no sense to continue if you do not really have the feeling that you understand the words without reading them, just by listening to them. So let's say you already recognize the words and you can already, let's say, repeat them, and you have the melody in your ears, and everything is working fine. Then you can move to the last step, which is writing, reading, and speaking. So now you should be able to use the language actively, and you can communicate in the foreign language. Of course, she also said there are different kinds of people. Some people prefer writing or just reading, and or, well, speaking, maybe not shy people. There are people that don't like to speak in a foreign language that much. They are afraid of making mistakes and all of this. So this is this fourth step can be carried out as you prefer, but I guess the goal of most of us is to be able to communicate in the foreign language. And she also said that of course, only by decoding one text, you're not going to know all the words of that language. So this is something you have to repeat over and over again with different texts until you have, let's say, a group of words, or let's say, you know already like the 500 most important words of a language, or let's say the stock you want to learn. And well, this would be basically how her method works. And as I said, I think something very important is that this method works if you're really willing to invest some time and to be like consequent with the method. It should be a process that you enjoy, that is fun for you. And I also spoke with well, with some people, because I wanted to know what other people thought. I also took some of her ideas and compared her ideas to things people learning with her method are actually doing already. And some of the ideas she had is to use labels to put, you know, you can in a book you're reading, you can just like put a post-it, or at home, or you can use images when decoding. If you like to draw, you might want to draw an image, or you can also practice by doing inverse decoding. So she even says, if you are able to do this inverse decoding into the let's say into the source language, this means that you really understood these phrases. And also her method is quite similar to the Absenger method, which in this case, the Absenger method speaks about intuitive assimilating. It's not completely the same, but it's a very similar method. And well, you should just adjust the method to your needs. So she was very open, and she said, if you have an idea of how to enrich this learning process, well, she was open to it. But for her, what was important is to follow these steps. She said, do not start trying to speak or to write if you do not understand what you're saying or what you're writing. So this is the part she considers being brain friendly. First, you have to understand, and once you absorb all of this knowledge, then you can produce speech. This is what she meant by the Wernicke's area of our brain and the Broca's area of our brain, and joining both of them. Okay, so I also spoke mainly with some polyglots that have been using her method. I am part of a group in Facebook, and I regularly contact some of the people in this group, and also in other groups. And what I asked them is, what are your challenges? So they said, well, first of all, they most of the polyglots really wanted to do the decoding on their own, and this takes time. You do not always find the right dictionary, or you don't have the recording, so you need a native speaker from time to time. Sometimes you find a video in YouTube, and let's say if you're learning Japanese, but then you realize in Japanese the culture plays a major role. So if you're a woman, you speak differently as if you are a man. So these are things where you might need some help. And many of the polyglots try to establish contact to native speakers to solve these little problems. And of course, if we have a question, we cannot ask Vera, of course, obviously. So many things remain unclear. And this is the part where you can just decide to adjust the method to your needs. This is something I think we all do. And everybody knows, knows himself at best and how he learns the best. Okay, so I thought it would be great if we could try to do some decoding. So the only thing, while I'm sharing my screen, I'm not able to see you. So, but I can hear you. So would any of you like to try out decoding this sentence? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen this way because I have to stop doing this on this mode. Otherwise, I cannot write. So let me see. Okay, so I have to do it this way. Okay, yes, this should work. So I'm going to share my screen with you now. Okay, so I wrote something in German. So would you like to try to decode this part?
Yeah, we would like to do that. So let's see, who will be our volunteer? Anyone? We have nice people here, beautiful German speakers. Who will help? Somebody? If nobody, I'll go with the first one. I'll go with the first one and then I call somebody and we do like that. So Sofia, what should I do?
Okay, so now let's say it's about doing this decodification, which consists of this wrong translation. So it's mainly just, translating word by word.
Okay, so let's do it in English. So nichts, nothing, is so successful like die own Erfolg, and a colleague mentioned you have to put L there. Thank you to Glynis Thompson. Erfolg. Can you see?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
His own success.
Yes.
Okay. So, okay.
That's right. So this would be, in this case, you would realize there is a similarity between German and English. So from times to times, you really just realize, okay, with this wrong decodification, actually, I might even get a right translation sometimes. Not always, but many times, or at least I really understand what it means.
Yeah, I mean, this also shows that English and German are in the same group, language group, right? So I am calling, let's see, who speaks German? Christina, please don't let me down. Can you do the next one? Christina's iPad, I know you speak German. But you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Oh, I don't know. How do I get my keyboard up? Kann ich
Sofia will write.
I think I'll have to type it in. I'm afraid we'll have to type it in.
Okay. Only when I recognize the needs of my fellow man or women, or when the needs of my co-workers or whatever. I don't know what that is.
Well, you could try with co-people, because
yeah.
I mean, this would be, let's say, what she meant with decoding.
Yeah, mid-measure those around me. Can I motivate them? If the needs of my, those.
That's a proper translation, rather.
Yes, that's right. So in this case, we would move this motivate to the back.
And the recognize should go to the end of the first, of the subclause.
That's right. Okay, only when the needs of my co.
Oh, I see. Right. Got it. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Right. Sure.
We know it's them because we can work it out grammatically, but if we're decoding, should we not say they?
That's right. That's right. That's a good observation. That's exactly what decoding is about. But it's good that we do this, as I said, just like together, so you can have a look and see where would you do it differently to have this wrong translation, as she meant.
You wouldn't know of my either. Minor, that you wouldn't know that it's a genitive. It would be my, probably. You wouldn't know that it's of my.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So, I mean, this would be now like sort of one of the things we should sort out of ourselves, because of course she had like her rules, but only for the languages she was decoding on her own. So we do not have sort of a manual. So this decoding part is something everybody can adjust a little bit, but as you did before, this was a good thing to do, to put recognize back here. And of my, let's say you would probably look for meine in I don't know, maybe a dictionary, and to see if you find it. But sometimes you will not find this declination. No. So there is where, let's say, the challenge begins on how to decode and why it takes time. So you would have probably to search for phrases in Google Translate and then realize, okay, this is what it actually means. So I'm just going to write it like this, because I think this is something you will not be able to do by searching the word in a dictionary, but with all the possibilities, all the tools we have nowadays, you would realize that meine is a possessive form. But of course, before, when she only had the dictionary, this would have represented a challenge, because how do you know this? You would have to have asked a native or search in different dictionaries or tools. Not online, of course, back then. Just having a look at it. And again, here, die Bedürfnisse. Now we also have like the plural form. So there are different possibilities, like writing the and maybe writing like, I don't know, PL for plural and feminine, or well, actually, yes, because the article D is the plural article, but it would be like the feminine. This is something, again, we would have to decide on how to do it, because in the singular form, you do not have die, but das Bedürfnis. So this is, of course, also one of the points to consider. And I even think if you have a look at the decodification of other person, it's going to be completely different to yours. Many people use colors and arrows and different tools to make it clear for them. So I would say step number one is the most personal step, because you have to adjust it to a way that you understand what you actually mean. Okay. Should we try the next one?
Okay. Who will take the last one or the third one?
Oh, I even have more.
I'll take it.
I had some in Italian. I just have to see how to type this.
Who said that? Who's
I'll take it.
Okay.
Who's I? I can't see you.
Angelica.
Angelica, super. Okay.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Children, make not that or the what we say.
Let's start with that.
What we say. But that what we do.
So in this case, it's also quite similar. So as you see, I mean, at the end you will realize, okay, yes.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You said a minute ago that this first decoding step is the most personal. But you also said that for some of your students, you actually do this decoding.
That's right. But this is because if you work with students, you have to establish like some rules. So if I decode Spanish, German, or Spanish, let's say English, if it would be the case, I would have to teach them first how to read my decoding. So let's say, for instance, I have never seen anyone doing these gender symbols. This is something I like to do. So this is like my personal rule. So I established this rule, and my students now know, okay, if I see this is feminine, or PL means plural, and so on. But of course, I have to teach them also how to understand my decodification. But as I said, like most of the polyglots I have met so far, which use this method quite a lot, they really have different approaches. Some of them even put some drawings there. If they have the word, for instance, I don't know, Ball, then they draw maybe a ball underneath. So they learn it with this image. So this is really a very, very flexible method. Okay. So I have one more, and this I included here Spanish and Italian, because I heard there were some people speaking Spanish or Italian. So I don't know if it's if it's okay.
Yeah, it's perfect. Oh, no, I don't know. Who speaks Spanish? No, Frederica.
I do.
Oh, who said that? Esli?
Yeah.
Super.
Okay.
Esli, bitte.
Okay, so I would say, okay, coding. There is no more, worth, late, that. No, what would be, okay. Yes, that, never.
That's right. And for instance, here we have word. If you have vale, what would be missing here is to know which person is this, which pronoun. So this would be like the third person. So this is also something we should include.
Yeah.
So there are different ways. I mean, you could do like it. This would be a way maybe, or maybe you can just decide to write like third person.
Yeah, but that wouldn't, the coding itself wouldn't do that.
Well, in decoding, as I said, there are different, let's say, strategies. Probably I would tend to do this it. So I just know, and maybe put it as I did, like yes, just to put it in between quotes to indicate, okay, this is the third person, because somehow I have to know what it is. Or even if the translation makes no sense, as I said.
Yeah.
Okay, and the next one, I don't know if you are the only Spanish speaker.
No.
Another one I have, yeah.
Mark, right? No, who said something?
Francisco, that's me.
Great, Francisco, please.
Yeah, it's me, like, play with chess.
Okay, what did you say for al?
Do. No, the chess, the.
Well, so for instance, in this case, if I would be doing the decoding, I would write something probably more like to me, like, to, wait. I would write to and then the chess. Because here you have a preposition and an article together. So me is actually like to me because you're using this this pronoun. So this is why. So these are, as I said, different approaches, but me, yes, I'm not sure. I mean, this is something I would also discuss, to me or me. But if I would have to me, I would do it like this.
I don't get the point of it.
And play, where would you put play in yours?
Oh, yes, wait. Here, just play. And this is the infinitive form. I would just leave it like that. But as I said, the important thing about decodification is that at the beginning, you really have to establish a set of rules on how you're going to decode, because otherwise it gets very confusing. If you, if I'm the one learning, it's clear to me, but it's not clear to other people. So if I work with students with my method, with the Birkenbihl method, with this method, I always have to provide them with a set of rules of how I'm going to decode the text. So I mostly have experience with the combination Spanish and German, because this is what I usually do. I teach German speakers to speak Spanish. So this is mainly my let's say, the set of rules I have. And of course, it depends on the language. It gets more complicated. As I said, I'm trying to learn Turkish now, and it's quite challenging because I have not really established a method yet on how I'm going to do it, because it's completely different to the languages I speak. Okay, so now I have two phrases in Italian.
I can go if nobody else speaks Italian.
But I think, sorry, can I just say, I think the whole point is to do it when you don't know the language. I think it would be more interesting to see, because that would be the true decoding, wouldn't it? A person that doesn't have a clue of yeah, so what does it sound, what images it brings to you, and that's how you're going to start coding. Decoding, sorry.
Of course, this is, we're creating sort of an artificial situation, because of course, if it's like me learning Turkish, I have no idea. So as Vera Birkenbihl said at the beginning, I just have blah, blah, blah words and I have no idea what it means. And I shouldn't even try to speak or to read anything because I have no idea. So the first step would be really just taking the words and doing the decodification, decoding them. And then in a further step later, listening to the recording, someone else has to do, obviously, because I have no idea how it sounds. So as I said, this is why it gets quite personal, or if you were working with someone, you really have to establish some rules. Because of course we are like polluted with our knowledge of the language, so we tend to translate. This is something we tend to do automatically. when we understand the language. But of course, in this setting, it's difficult because otherwise we would have to do all the research. And if I would have chosen, for instance, Chinese and nobody spoke Chinese, we would need like an hour to decode just like a short paragraph.
I think Sara, you wanted to show the Italian one, right?
Yeah, I can go.
Please speak.
So I would decode it as what, want, say, and I would put in parentheses third person singular. I don't know if that like.
Okay, I'm just going to do it like this. Sync.
Yeah.
Okay, if I do that.
And I mean, the general meaning of the question is, what does it mean? But obviously, like, dire is the actual verb to say.
And here, maybe in one, we would also need the pronoun.
Yeah.
What would be the pronoun? What would you choose as?
She, he, like.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, I can only think about doing it like this. Of course, now we also have other topics like being gender neutral, or I don't know, there are many things. Yes, there are many things we should have to consider. So these options, of course, are something to decide by the person decoding. And if you are the teacher, you have to create your own frame of rules. This is something actually when I was certified by Vera Birkenbihl, and I wrote a couple of courses for different languages, which were translated, of course, by native speakers, the content, because I wrote the content, and then they did the decoding too. It was quite interesting also for me, because I had to establish the rules of this decodification together with natives from all of these languages, because many of them were languages I didn't speak. So it was this was also a very interesting part.
Sofia, sorry to interrupt. In chat, we have, I will read it for you. How about think for cosa instead of what? And then two more colleagues agree with this suggestion. So.
Yes, yes, that's right. This would be something we would also, I mean, cosa in Spanish is also think. So actually, this would be correct to say here like think. Then you really get this wrong or translation or decodification, which makes no sense in English, but which when you are learning according to her method, which actually would work, because you have to establish this relation between the words in the words that are actually said in the foreign language.
Can I do the last one?
Yeah, sure.
Aida, let's go.
I know some Italian. I used to know more, but I've forgotten. So it's mi scusi, posso farle una domanda, which I can decode it. Excuse me.
Wait, I'm just thinking this. You would have to put it at the beginning, like me. I think.
Yeah, me excuse. Can make una. So it's first. Is the first person singular.
So
una is one.
Or you could even just do it like this. Can I?
So can I actually? Can I make a question, or can I say something? I'm not sure. I think it's a question.
I think so too.
Yes.
That's right. And I mean, as I said, there are different ways. What I usually do, if one word like posto is just like one word, but in English I would have two, I just use this this dash to combine it and to so that it means actually for me it means this is one word. This is one word for me.
Just one thing from here, moderator. Nicole is saying make you formal, le is formal you, and again. And then Glenis is saying we missed le on fare.
Oh, posso le farle. Excuse me, posso le farle una domanda.
Okay, so here you would also need like probably like a you, and maybe write decide how to make an abbreviation like for formal. Maybe you can do just like this. But as I said, of course, if you give this to someone and he has no idea of what form means, and it means formal, you would have to write at the beginning like the set of rules that you're going to use.
Yeah. Then Sarah mentioned, I would also point out the una is feminine. I'd write in parentheses.
That's right. That's right. You could, let's say, decide to do it like this. Feminine. That's right. As I said, for instance, I always do I use the masculine and the feminine symbols because I thought it was easier for me to understand. But this is something and everyone has to decide. There are no rules. Let's say Vera Birkenbihl didn't write the rules on how to do this decoding. She said she gave up a couple of examples of how she did it, and there is a video in YouTube. I could send it to Romana later. Actually, I had at the beginning of my presentation. I think it was here. Yeah, here. This picture when I made this workshop, she was decoding Indonesian. So it was quite interesting because she had never learned Indonesian before. So she had actually no idea of what she was doing. And so she just started to create the decodification rules for Indonesian. But I can only say once she had the presentation in the Netherlands and she started to learn the language, I think 2 months earlier or a month and a half. And then she held her presentation in Dutch. So it was really very quick. Of course, German, English, they're very similar languages, but still, I wouldn't feel comfortable if I would have to speak Turkish in 2 months in front of anybody.
Sofia, sorry to disturb. Susanne is asking, what symbol do you use for neuter?
That's a good question. Usually when I work with my students, I write an N and a point, just like this. Because in Spanish and in German, I mean, this is something you might understand, like or NT. But you can be creative and even decide to use, I don't know, both symbols, both gender symbols and just slash. So this is really a very, very flexible method. And I even think this is why many people like to learn with the method. I mean, my students are primarily people that speak already a lot of languages, are interested in alternative methods, but I also had some businessmen that wanted to do this passive learning while they were on their business trips. So this was also quite interesting to me because they even came and gave me, let's say, vocabulary or the terminology of the company they were working at, and I tried to write some text related to their job and do the decoding, and they did it sometimes like in the plane, they were reading and listening to all of this. So it's interesting. Yeah. Do you have any questions, or is there anything else you would like to, I don't know, to say about this decoding? As I said, of course. I
was writing a question, but can I just say it?
Yeah, sure.
What level? What is the right level for the students to start to do decoding? Because I've been teaching the Albanian language for a long time, and this decoding, it seems so good because the Albanian language is so completely, when you want to translate from Albania to English. So decoding, I can see now, is going to help them a lot. But what level? Where is the right time to start?
Well, according to Vera Birkenbihl, even if you have never learned anything about the language, even if the language is completely new to you, you could do the decoding. Of course, it's going to take time. The less you know, the more time you will have to invest. But as I said, for instance, I'm trying to learn Turkish now, and I'm really starting from scratch. So I don't even know, I think I know 2 words so far. So I will have to invest a lot of time. If your students already speak the language a little bit, the only thing is you will have to force them to unlearn what they know, in the sense that you are, as we were saying before, we are already like a little bit compromised by the fact that we already know the language. So it is sometimes even more difficult to get rid of what you know than to learn something from scratch, because it's a completely different approach.
Yeah.
I'll try that with Korean because I have 0, like 0, but it's kind of, pure.
Yes, I mean, I'm aware that this method, I also teach at university. So this is a method that would be, it's very difficult to use the method in an academic setting. Because when you are working in an academic setting, people need to learn the grammar rules because that's what they need these rules to teach the language. But Vera Birkenbihl also wrote some books, for instance, for parents, like, I don't know, Nachhilfe, leicht gemacht. I don't know exactly the name of the book. I loved it. And I do use the method with my daughters. I mean, I have 3 daughters. They were raised bilingual and they all learned other languages in school. And from time to time, it works out quite well because this is like playing a game, sort of. So they enjoy it and they like to do it too. But I'm aware that this is a method which that is difficult to adapt to an academic setting, probably.
So here we have in our question in our chat. I'll read it. I just found one from Glynis. Many of the basic principles of language learning were commonly discussed and implemented in the 70s and 80s. However, the decoding process seems to imply starting from a written text. Now, how do you do that if the alphabet is different, for example, Russian?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good question. I mean, Vera Birkenbihl actually did this too with Chinese and Japanese and other languages, but I think she had probably before she even started to do the decoding. Well, Russian is different to Chinese. You do not have like these ideograms in Russian, but letters. Probably you would even have to make a chart. I must say I have no experience in decoding Russian. This is something I have never done, and I don't speak any Slavic language. So I would say probably what she would do is to write the chart before she starts. So to have the equivalence. Mm-hmm.
Okay, then, there's another one. If I would learn 3 languages at the same time with the Birkenbihl method, would I be able to make sure my accents won't get confused in the process? Let's say I am totally enthusiastic. I want to learn, I don't know, Spanish, Korean, and Swahili. How would my brain actually manage that at all?
Well, that's a difficult question to ask. I mean, I know she did it, and I know many polyglots that do that. And if any of you has like any question like this one, you can always send me an email, and I am in contact with many polyglots, and it's quite interesting what they answer because they have the experience. I can only speak from my own experience, and I have been focusing on teaching Spanish to German speakers. So this is the focus of my experience. But of course, I mean, I'm always amazed when I listen people learn Japanese or Chinese with this method and quite quick. And I'm really, really surprised to see how fast they learn the language. Mm-hmm.
Maya, you wrote something. Would you like to read?
Yeah.
You're on mute.
Okay, so now but I can read it. I can read it.
No. Although, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I actually have used these sort of funny sentences just sometimes to show I teach Hebrew and German, but especially with German to kind of show how, in what way it differs from English. So it is quite fun. I must admit, I really enjoy, with the word order, especially to highlight the similarities and yet the differences. But so that I kind of bring it in my teaching, but not as a method, obviously. But the other thing is, which in my teacher training, they're hammered into us, not to do translations, they sort of really don't translate, and also really make it very communicative from the very beginning. I'm teaching myself Arabic at the moment, just with Duolingo, and I find that the reading really is holding me back, while the listening, I actually get into it and I can, make out words and so on. So how do we change our attitude? I find it really hard to see it from a different direction, to actually change the whole method rather than implementing some of the nice and really interesting elements in this method.
Well, this is actually one of the main, let's say, points that is very, very different to the rest of the method, because according to her, this brain-friendly way of learning languages is exactly based on a different approach. So for her, you have to understand by decoding before you can speak or write. So she even says, don't start speaking or reading, don't start speaking or writing before you do not do the decoding or start listening. So this is really against what we are used to. But actually, as I said, you could even skip this step. Decoding it's really not, somehow not really a part of the process. It can be, but it doesn't have to be part of the process, as someone else can also do it for you. So if somebody, let's say, does this part for you, you would start from listening. So listening would be even step number 1. But of course, I mean, I'm aware that this is different. This was, of course, her approach on what she thought that was brain friendly. And she said, we have to understand before we produce speech. So this is why she has another order on how working with her method. And for her, it was really important that we keep this order. And as I said, step 1, decoding, this is somehow part of the process, but at the same time, something you can also let someone else do for you.
Sofia, can you see Sarah's Petitsis question?
About sign language. Oh, I'm not sure. I have never read anything about sign language, but I'm sure if you join any of these groups in Facebook, for instance, you will probably find people learning sign languages with her method. I have even met people trying to learn like karate or to teach, better say, karate and any topic with her method. So actually you will find people trying to learn not only languages, but all kinds of stuff with her method. And it's quite interesting because these are already creative approaches based on what she thought. And the thought behind was always making content easy for people to understand. So she's always simplifying the content of any topic.
Well, there are more. There are more. Aisley asked, did Vera mention anything along the lines of making sense of what you listen or to start thinking in the foreign language?
Well, what she said about starting thinking the foreign language, this is something that should come with the last step. When you are already like listening to these phrases and doing the listening, of course, this is also a process, because as I said, it's not because you have already decoded one text that you're going to be able to understand every text, but this should come also together with the last step. When the latest, when you try to speak already the language. Okay, if you do not know the language at all, would you start the decoding by using a dictionary and looking up each word? Well, yes, this is of course an option. Many people I know work with these, how do you call them? By Lonely Planet, there are a lot of traveling books and this stuff, and at the end you have sort of a glossary. So many people work with these kind of texts at the beginning, especially if they want to learn the language because they're going on a trip. Like these guides.
I have a question. Let's say you now say, all right, I'll test this method. And you say, all right, I'll spend 3 hours per week or 2 hours per week. How long do you need to be, at the level to
become fluent?
Yeah.
I mean, in my experience, the fastest I have ever experienced was a guy that moved from New York to Mallorca because he liked it there, and he was always riding a bike, and he really wanted to learn the language. So he learned with this method, and I can say after 3 months he could speak, not perfect, not fluently, but he could hold a conversation in Spanish. But of course, this has a lot to do with self-motivation. And most of the dialogues we were doing were about Mallorca, about riding a bike, about the mountains, and going to the gym. He was very sporty, so it was important for him to learn the language. And he was really very quick. I was even amazed how good he could speak the language and how fast.
Yeah. Do we have some more questions? Maybe. If not, how can we get in touch with you if we want to know more? Or if something
yes, I will display my contact data. And if you have any questions, this is my email address. If you have any questions, or even if you want to know, as I said, I'm going to start learning Turkish now. This is because my daughter married someone from Turkey, and now my grandson is going to be raised with Spanish and probably many languages. So I want to learn Turkish. You can even ask me in a couple of months, how am I doing? Because I'm really beginning from scratch and I want to take it easy. So I will probably only learn like 15 minutes a day. And let's see how far I get and how fast. This is also an experiment for me, somehow, learning Turkish.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, we are almost at the end. So I would just say, wait a minute, let's see. Questions so far, so good. Now, for me, as this huge fan, that was perfect. I really enjoyed it. It's really nice. I think that it's really nice of you to share with you that you had this experience from the first hand. I'll definitely ask you in 2 months how it's going. I will also share, you know, if you want the recording with you, and I can then also add Sofia's contact, just in case if somebody wants to get in touch. But now I will, can you stop sharing that I have to do promotion for our German Language Society, that you'll know what we are doing next. Just a second, share screen. Where is it? Here. Share. I hope you can see my screen. Just a moment. So as I mentioned, we are normally, this is Sofia. So we are normally having these events once. Just a moment that I can put it here. Okay, we are having these once per month. Now the next 3 will be in German. You are of course super welcome. In February we'll speak about Carnival. In March we do, the speaker is actually here, it's Dr. Isabelle. We will do Die Sprache der Werbung, so all about commercial language in German language. And in April we will speak about the polyglot Emil Krebs. I think the speaker is also here today. So this will be in German representation, and as you notice, we always kind of finish with some discussion where we are free to state our opinions or ask questions. If there are any other topics, you're super welcome to send an email. And then in May, we'll do something in English. And then June will be probably an actress telling us how to speak nicer German, which, sound better. Yeah, and so on. We'll proceed a year. So if anyone would like to say something, you are super free to do. We still have a few minutes. And if not, then Sofia, how was that for you? Are you on mute?
Well, no, it was an interesting experience, especially because I'm not really used to speaking English in front of an audience, so I did my best. And well, I hope you go home and at least keep in mind Vera Birkenbihl is very, very interesting. And
we are in lockdown. We won't go anywhere. We probably stay where we are. But yeah, so nothing. I'll share the recording and everything. If you check the chat, you're getting lots of thank you. Also big thank you from me. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
And nothing. See you around. Herzlich willkommen. Hey, maybe somebody can try, German with this Vera Birkenbihl.
Yeah.
And then get in touch to see how this works. Perfect. Nicole will try it out. I'll try it out. A lot of us. Enjoy. Stay healthy, and we'll see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.